5 days until a new administration takes over as President Biden decides to leave office doing what he did while he was in office, spend billions more of your taxpayer dollars. And joining us this morning to discuss some of the big money headlines is former White House economic advisor Steve Moore. Good morning to you.
Jan, good morning.
You say Biden's parting gift to Americans has been another $2 trillion deficit. How much more did the federal government borrow just in the past few months?
Well, a report just came out a couple of days ago by the Congressional Budget Office that measures what's going on week after week, month after month. And we're 3 months into the fiscal year, Jan. You know, the fiscal year began on October 1st. And so we have 3 months worth of data. And so far, the budget deficit is running $200 billion ahead of where it was last year. And last year was one of the biggest years ever. So we're on pace for another $2 trillion budget deficit this year, which is gargantuan. Now, of course, Trump comes in a few days and they can change the direction of that. But the 2025 budget is already pretty set. He'll be working on the 2026 budget. The point here is that the president is going to need to rescind some of this spending. We just can't afford it.
Right.
We cannot continue on this path of $2 trillion deficits a year, or we're going to bankrupt our country.
I also saw a chart showing the share of federal spending versus state and local spending. And it's really indicative of how federal powers have ballooned.
Yeah.
If you could please talk about these numbers where you can see this complete shift right here.
That's right. So historically in the United States, that most of the government spending has been at the state and local level, and that's been consistent with our founders' vision that the federal government would have very limited powers. And yet you can see that it used to be 2/3 of the spending was done at the state and local level. Today, 2/3 of the spending is done at the federal level. That's a big problem. The states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states, and yet the states have become kind of subjects of the federal government. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
I think we reverse that trend.
That is a great chart right there showing that very thing. Taxes right now, obviously a huge priority for this administration. Talk about Trump's proposals and what he needs Congress to pass.
Well, I want to make sure that all of your viewers know something very important, which is that if Congress does nothing this year, everyone's taxes are going up because the Trump tax cuts would expire. So doing nothing is not an option. They have to pass a tax bill. Trump wants two things. He wants to extend the tax cuts that were passed in 2017, and he wants some additional tax cuts that he talked about on that campaign. And you know what I'm talking about, Jan. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. Now, I don't think, frankly, that he's going to be able to do all that stuff. I think they're going to have to select what's the most important priorities. But to me, the most important priority is get the
extend the tax cuts. Yeah.
2017 cemented into law.
Correct. What about the corporate tax rate going down to 15%?
Could happen. So what Trump is talking about is a really interesting new way of taxing, where he's saying we're going to cut the tax rate on things that are made in the USA to 15%. But then at the same time, Jan, he's talking about raising tariffs, which are taxes on things that come in from China and Mexico and other countries. Now, people are going to have to decide for themselves whether they think that's a good idea or not. But the idea is if something's made in Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania, it's going to pay a lower tax rate. If things are coming in from other countries, a higher tax rate. We'll see how other countries respond to that. But Trump just put out a declaration yesterday that on day one, he's going to start with new tariffs. So this could be a tariff war that's brewing.
Meantime, speaking of taxes, the Treasury Inspector General for the Tax Administration issued a report that found the IRS is not taking care of American taxpayers' confidential information. So what is the agency doing?
Not much to keep our taxes, secure. By the way, when you file a tax document or a tax form, that is supposed to be private. That is not supposed to be publicly available. But the IRS system has been hacked. We had tens of thousands of people whose tax returns were publicized. And so you can see from these bins, that's where they're throwing the confidential information. And it's clear that the auditor said, hey, this is not keeping these forms safe. It's not a way to make sure that people can get a hold of this tax data and put it in the New York Times or the Washington Post. So the IRS needs to do a much better job protecting the privacy of our tax information, our income. I don't want people to know, how much deductions I took for this or that, or how much income I made.
Right. Someone's business. All right. Former White House economic advisor Steve Moore. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week.